So when I first started learning herbalism a long, long time ago, I didn't know who to trust. I was like, well, who are these people? Who are these authors that I'm reading? And how do I know that they know what they're talking about? So that was a problem for me for quite some time. But what I decided was just to go ahead and start reading stuff because I wanted to at least get used to reading about the plants and everything else. So hello Jennifer, I see you there. Just switch back and forth from screens here. So I started with a book. I show this book often in my little tutorials, and I don't see it up here on my shelf. It's the herb book by John Lust. It's kind of a strange name, but where's my awesome book? It's just a little book. And at the time, that's the only book I really had access to. I don't even know how I got access to it, maybe a bookstore or something like that. But the bookstores that were around in my area in the 90s, there wasn't a ton that I could find on herbalism. Or maybe I wasn't looking in the right spot, I don't know. But again, I didn't know even which authors to trust and to like. So over time, I learned which ones to trust by reading their literature and looking at their sources and following the source trail to see, where this stuff came from. Also, by seeing people in person at conferences, that really helps a lot. And then who they're trained by. So for instance, there's a lady online, her name is Rosalie de LaFaive, and I started following her quite some time ago. And I really liked her. I liked her approach. I knew that she was studying with the East-West School of Herbology, I think it's called. That's the Tierras, like Michael Tierra. And I had already, started to understand that that was a reputable source. And then she has, even studied with or been with Rosemary Gladstar and Jim McDonald, all the really good herbalists that are out there. So I knew that too, that was good. So I kind of looked at, her personality. The personality helps a lot. If you can't get along or watch somebody's personality, that's gonna be hard to learn from them. Then I look at how they learned. And I like a combination of self-study, other teachers, reading, research, doing the gardening, making herbal remedies and stuff like that. And then I also look at, who they studied with too. So just because if I don't know their teachers, it doesn't mean anything really. It's just that that's kind of how I vet through my authors and people I learn from. So the teacher that I learned from is a local person. She's, had her own herbalism clinic. She's got she's a naturopath. She's been teaching around this Great Lakes area for a number of decades. And so, she's just reputable, and I trained with her alongside her. And so I just really agreed with kind of her way of looking at plants and doing herbalism and stuff like that. So that's how I kind of picked my teacher. Let's see here. So some books that I will show you. So of course, I'll just talk a little bit about Susan Weed. Susan Weed and Rosemary Gladstar have been around probably about the same exact time. So they've really been, really had to find some, decades before the internet, they really had to find people who would train them. There maybe were some books out there, but they were really doing, down to the ground green medicine. They had to be really trying things. And then I have Gladstar's Herbal Healing for Women. So any of Gladstar's books, I really like her. Like I said in the past, I've met her. I've seen her at conferences. I'm in her online class. She's very reputable. So Susan Weed has some really great stuff. Again, it may be a personality thing, who you want to listen to, who you want to study with. And so just to keep that in mind. So some of the other books that I've liked, this one's a little bit more of a research one. So, you know, I love research. I dislike research. There's a lot of reasons to like research and not like research. So I just take research, you know, as interesting information, just like I would with somebody that I just met who says they're an herbalist, or who says that their grandparents, other wise people in their family taught them. You know, I'm like, that's really great information. I'll keep that in mind and see if it lines up with all the other resources and references that I look into. So Herbs Demystified is written by a woman who's actually a biochemist, drug researcher, teacher, and she's got a bachelor's degree in biology and chemistry, as well as a doctorate in medicinal chemistry from the University of Utah. So she's, you know, very well trained in the research area, and she kind of combines she reads a bunch of research about particular plants, and then she kind of compiles it in an easier way to read. So she'll talk about the commonly reported uses for feverfew, evidence of action, what's in it, some interesting facts, some not so good effects, and not so good effects. So it's a really interesting read. If you're looking into the research of what's been done on herbs, this would be a good book to reference from. And it's really good to understand, you know, if something says, oh, the research said that this plant didn't work, or it did work, it's really good to look at the research article and just see how it was done, how many samples and stuff like that. I won't go into like how to determine if research is reputable or not, but yeah, you know, if I see something says research said this, I know that it's not like a written in stone thing, that there's different ways to do research and you have to look at the methods. So, but it's really good. It's really interesting. Another one that I like, The Chinese Medicinal Herb Farm by Peg Schaefer, very well known. This book is really great. It gives all sorts of information on how to grow herbs, especially ones that are in the Chinese medicine line. Lots of information on how to grow them. Pest disease information, harvest yields. So if somebody's wanting to grow for commercial purposes, this would be great too, but it's also good for anybody else who wants to grow things, because it just gives you a lot of information. Really, like there's like these plant profiles, like this one is Euthero. So this one's usually called Siberian ginseng, although it's not a true ginseng, so it's Euthero. And yeah, it tells you how to plant it. So, and I think it even does it tell you how to dry it? It's kind of a book I go to for hard to find information on herbs. I mentioned this a little bit. Botany Today is another one that's great for helping to identify plants and getting you to understand what certain plant families look like. So, and it also gives a bit of information on what the herbs can be used for as well. It gives some pretty pictures. Okay, there's some of those books. I'm just looking up here for a few more. Okay, so anything by Aviva Ram is great. Aviva Ram is definitely reputable. She's trained as a medical doctor and an herbalist. So she's, you know, got that the best of both worlds, I guess I could say. So Adrenal Thyroid Revolution. This one is all about mood, metabolism, hormones, and a very holistic approach to it, but there's definitely herbs in here she talks about. She's got some other books out too. Anything about by Stefan Harrod Boyner, or Buhner, I think it's called. So herbal antibiotics, herbal antivirals. He's got a number of books out, very well researched. So if you're looking for researched information, it's in here. And he's such a funny writer. Like he writes, it's kind of dry humor, of course, but you know, it's like one of the few books that has it in there. Really in-depth plant profiles, very in-depth. So again, he's read all the research and then kind of combined it, and then also interweaved, you know, just that like traditional herbalism, both quantitative and qualitative stuff. There's also formulations in here. It's just a wealth of good information. It's maybe not something you want to read front to back because there's plant profiles in here, and sometimes I just use those kinds of books as references. Another one that I use is, here we go, Michael Tierra is one I just mentioned his name, The Way of Herbs. There's certainly other ones out there. His wife, Leslie Tierra, I think has a book out. It's geared for kids, like a book for kids. Almost ordered it on Amazon, but held myself back. So yeah, this one's really good too. It's got a little, some more unique ones in there because he is very much into like Chinese traditional medicine. And I believe that's even his background. So he's been around for a long, long time. And yes, there's formulas in here too. Chickweed salve, comfrey paste, poultices, antispasmodic formulas, some really in-depth formulas that have, 10 plus plants in there. So very good. It's a very good one. There aren't any pictures in this one. Another one I like to go to is James Duke. He used to work for a federal agency. Let me think. He was with the USDA, United States Department of Agriculture, for 30 years, and he was able to do studies on medicinal plants. And he worked with a lot of plants. He went overseas, I believe, early in his career. And worked with the Amazon rainforest, people in the Amazon. So he's got an interesting perspective in here. So this one's a fairly small little snippets. And the Green Pharmacy, you can find things based on health things like breastfeeding problems. There's a whole section on that. So that's how that goes. So a few pictures here and there, but it's a good read. A nice, more of a compact one to have maybe stuck in your car or at work, anywhere where you can maybe pick up a book quickly and just read for 5-10 minutes, 15. This would be a really great one to put in your little nooks and crannies. So, and then here's a few more. If you're looking for more like sacred, earth sacredness and nature spirituality, then I would go with something like Starhawk. Starhawk has been around again for several decades. Talks a lot about, this has got the history of the witch burnings and how people have evolved to see the earth in certain ways. And it's just a really, really good read. Anything by Starhawk. She's got some new stuff out too, about how to bring meditations and different rituals into your life, and a lot of nature spirituality stuff. So that is a good chunk of, not a good chunk, but there's a lot of stuff. Those are some of my go-to books that I have. There's some really cool stuff out there too. I mean, there's so many books I would love to get my hands on, but there is a budget that I have to keep to, and I only have so much time in the day. And then I want to get out with the real plants too. So that's as much as the books are great, you also need to keep in mind that you have to have a personal relationship, a personal experience with the real plants in their real habitat. Meet them in their home as much as possible. Bring them inside to dry them.